Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. This week once again sponsored by NordPass, where you can get a 2-year NordPass premium plan plus an additional 4 months for free this time. All of course completely risk-free, covered by NordPass's 30-day money-back guarantee. Just go to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get this deal and keep those passwords safe and organised. I noted with some amusement recently that on the 21st of July this year, a hacker under the alias Devil posted on breach forums that they'd managed to get their hands on personal data of 5.4 million Twitter users, including email addresses and phone numbers. He did it by exploiting a vulnerability that a white hat hacker by the name of Ziranovsky had told Twitter about 6 months earlier in January. Twitter claimed that they patched this vulnerability when they first heard about it, but then in August admitted that it may have been a factor in the July data breach. 6 months after they reckoned they'd patched the vulnerability. You just cannot trust these buggers to tell you the truth. You certainly can't trust them to keep your data safe, which is why I don't trust them to tell me the truth. And I use NordPass's data breach scanner to let me know well in advance that I might need to change my passwords. And oh, look at that. NordPass can help me with that too. So head on over to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get a 2-year NordPass premium plan with 4 months for free, all covered by NordPass's 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. Well, so it's been a fairly momentous week in this country. In a week where the biggest news should have been that we have a new Prime Minister, and that lying, cheating clown shoe Boris Johnson is finally out and replaced with Liz Truss. But the big news was, of course, the death of Her Royal Majesty Queen Elizabeth II at the age of 96. She outlasted her husband, Prince Philip, by just over a year, and I don't think too many people were surprised that she didn't last long after losing the man she'd been married to for 73 years. But it was very, very sudden. I mean, there were no indications that she was unwell. The news reported that doctors had been to see her at her country residence in Balmoral Castle up in Scotland. And then a few hours later, they announced the news that she was dead. The Queen is dead. Long live the King. So Prince Charles, who is now King Charles III, and he's 74. So I don't think there's much chance that he's going to beat Queen Elizabeth's record of being the longest-serving British monarch. Queen Elizabeth was only, I think, 25 when she became queen after the sudden death of her father, King George. And she sat on that throne for more than 70 years. The second longest serving monarch in history. She beat Queen Victoria's record by a country mile. And she was second only to, one of the Louis XIV of France. He sat on the French throne for 72 years, although he did kind of cheat a bit because he was crowned king when he was only 6. But then again, this was in the 1600s. And living as long as he did was pretty damn rare back then. People did not tend to live quite as long, so fair enough. Queen Elizabeth had a hell of a life. She was old enough to join the auxiliary services during World War II, where she trained as a driver and mechanic, and served her country even before she became queen. During her life, she was more than just the Queen of the United Kingdom. Obviously, there's the Commonwealth as well. In fact, at one point, she was the Queen of 32 separate sovereign countries. Although that number obviously fluctuated as countries left the British Commonwealth, or proclaimed independence, or became republics. But even at the time of her death, she was still the technical sovereign and head of state of 15 different countries. Although the term head of state should be taken with a pinch of salt. I mean, she was. Even in Britain today, if a law is passed in Parliament, for example, it doesn't actually become a new law until it receives royal assent, when the monarch signs it into law. And technically, the monarch, if they didn't like the new law, could just say, nope, refuse to sign it, and now what are you going to do? But of course, that would never actually happen, because what Parliament do is declare the country a republic and get rid of the monarch. So, yeah. There is precedent for this, of course. The last time a British monarch, King Charles II in this case, tried to pull that kind of shit, the country ended up fighting a civil war that lasted 9 years and ended with the king's head in a bucket. Now, I'm not saying that if the new King Charles III tried anything similar, he'd end up getting his head cut off, but let's just say he wouldn't be King Charles III for very long. And of course, he's 74 years old. He's probably still not going to be King Charles III for very long. I think it's going to be an extremely long time before we have a monarch in this country that's going to challenge Queen Elizabeth II's title as longest-serving monarch. I mean, even if King Charles lasts as long as his mother did and survives to the age of 96, his son is going to be 62. Yeah, I think old Queen Liz's record is safe, at least for the foreseeable future. It's really weird not having a queen, though. I mean, for my entire life, and I'm 52, it's been Her Royal Majesty. It's been Her Majesty's ships. This is really going to take some getting used to. And I don't have anything against King Charles. I mean, I know some people think he's a bit of a happy, clappy, hippie, trippy tree hugger. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But there's no way he is ever going to be as popular as Queen Elizabeth was. I mean, 70 years on the throne. Through constitutional crisis after constitutional crisis. One world war. And she was just always there, doing her duties gracefully. And, I mean, there are a lot of Republicans in this country who would like to see the monarchy gotten rid of. And Britain declared a republic. And while there are always exceptions, I think it's fairly safe to say that most of them, even if they didn't love the Queen, still had a lot of respect for her. And while I'm not a Republican, I don't really consider myself pro-monarchy either. Although if asked to vote, I would vote against becoming a republic. I would definitely be in favour of keeping the royal family. Because what would you gain from becoming a republic? I don't see the point. You just codify into law everything that's basically taken for granted anyway. Because, like I said, the monarch does not really have any constitutional power. I mean, technically they do. But if they ever tried to exercise that constitutional power, we'd be a republic overnight. So, what's the harm? They do more good than bad. Of course, that depends on who's sitting on the throne, of course. But we've had an amazing woman sitting on the throne for the last 70 years. Not by everybody, of course. I'm sure many of you have probably seen the uproar, and this is just one example, of the professor of race theory. Apparently, that's a thing you can get a job teaching now. Some American university who went on Twitter hoping that Queen Elizabeth had died an excruciating death. That started trending on Twitter. This is the thing, though. I mean, things like Twitter exist now. So anybody, no matter how big an arsehole they are, can get onto Twitter and say the most hateful and vile things, wishing an excruciatingly painful death on a 96-year-old great-grandmother, a widow who's just barely gotten over the loss of the man that she'd been married to for longer than most of us have been alive, and who never did anything other than faithfully and gracefully serve her country for 70 years. And who knows, maybe the sudden exposure on Twitter will help her sell a few more copies of her book, Racialized Identities in Second Language Learning, Speaking Blackness in Brazil. But I can't help but feel there are more graceful ways of promoting a book. And I mean, speak your mind. Get it off your chest. I am a big supporter of free speech. For one thing, it gets all of the idiots out there in public where we can spot them from a mile away just by reading their tweets. And on a more serious note, if you do have a problem with Britain's colonial past, you're absolutely entitled to express those views. But if it's possible to express those views and make those points with a little bit of dignity, in a way that doesn't make you come across as a complete arsehole, maybe try that. And leave the Queen out of it. She was an old woman who never did you any harm. Queen Elizabeth II, 1926 to 2022. Died, age 96. The Queen is dead. Long live the King. And good luck to him. Because if the currently trending #NotMyKing on Twitter is anything to go by, I think old Chuck is going to need all the luck he can get. Anyway, moving on. I owe a shout out to Daring Do, one of the minions on the Salt Mines Discord server, who recommended I take a look at a new game which has just gone on to early access on Steam. It's called Gunner Heat PC, and if you haven't figured out by the title, it's a tank simulator. Of course, it's a tank simulator in the way that World of Tanks absolutely definitely isn't. World of Tanks is very definitely an arcade game where you drive boxes of hit points around that just kind of look like tanks. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there is absolutely an audience for that under the right circumstances. World of Tanks can still be very enjoyable to play, or at least fun to watch. But there hasn't really been a proper tank simulator available on the market in a really long time. But Jingles, what about Arma 3? Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, Arma 3, it's not a tank simulator. It is a simulator, and it has tanks in it, but there's a lot more than just tanks. Well, there you go then, Jingles. Arma 3. Well, yeah, but I said there hasn't been a proper tank simulator out in a really, really long time. And Arma 3 isn't actually a tank simulator. You could argue that's one of the things that makes it better than just a tank simulator, because it simulates so much more. But the other part of the thing that I said was, in a really, really long time. And Arma 3 is great, but it's nearly 10 years old. So, and I haven't actually played Gunner Heat PC yet myself. I've just finished downloading and installing it, and I'm going to have a shot right after I've done this episode of Mingles with Jingles. And who knows, there may be a video upcoming in the very near future. I hear they have the basics, because it's in early access, it's not a finished title. And I hear they have the basics of a rudimentary campaign and a whole bunch of multiplayer skirmishes in place, and I think some story missions. It reminds me a lot of, based on what I've seen of it, the original Operation Flashpoint. Does anybody remember that? That was set in the Cold War, and it was the predecessor of the Arma games. I think there were some legal problems where Codemasters, the publisher, retained the rights to the name Operation Flashpoint, but the developers, Bohemia Interactive, just went and made their own thing. And then Codemasters pushed the next Operation Flashpoint out without Bohemia Interactive, and it was dog shit. But yes, the original Operation Flashpoint, set during the Cold War, where NATO forces were defending against a Russian invasion of some fictional island, whatever, anyway. And Gunner Heat PC takes place in the same Cold War 1980s kind of time period. Sort of thing. I don't know, like I said, I haven't actually played it yet. I've just watched some of the promotional material. So yeah, I'm keen to have a go with that. It looks pretty good. I just hope and I realise that, it's in early access, so polishing things like the user interface might not be one of their top priorities just yet, but I do hope they address some of the issues that I have with other hardcore simulators, like Arma 3, and like, what's the name of the flight sim that everybody and their dog plays? I can't remember the name. It'll come back to me in a minute. No, not Microsoft Flight Sim. DCS, that was it. Yeah, Digital Combat Simulator, or I believe the Steam version is called DCS World, whatever. Anyway, yeah, amazing simulator. It's got the difficulty curve of a brick wall, though. So, yeah, I hope this Gunner PC Heat isn't quite like that, otherwise I'll never have the time to learn how to play it. But anyway, fingers crossed. So what's next? Oh yeah, new patch in World of Warships. The operations are back. Actually, there's a couple of news items about World of Warships this week. Let's start with the good stuff. Operations are back. So Sunday morning I jumped onto the Bob's Clan TeamSpeak and joined Red Baron, Rita Gamer and a bunch of the guys from the Bob's Clan, and we farmed the new, well, they're not really new, the returned operations in World of Warships. Just like the old operations, except better. So I covered this a couple of weeks ago. Basically, we're not going to go into the whole history of how Wargaming basically lied to us and deliberately drove operations into the ground in order to justify just abandoning the whole game mode and cancelling all further development on it, and was one of the things that they promised that they would do better on, and by God they have. So all of the old operations are back. Operation Ultimate Frontier, Operation Hermes, and Operation Cherry Blossom, the one that featured night battles for the first time in World of Warships. And now you can play them at any, well, not any tier. The operations always used to be gated by whatever the specific tier of ship was that was required for that operation. So most of them were for tier 6 only. Operation Hermes allowed some tier 8s. Operation Cherry Blossom was tier 7 allied cruisers only. There were restrictions on the tier and nations of ships that you could bring into these games. Well, that's all gone. Now you can queue in anything from tier 6 all the way up to tier 8. So trying some of these old tier 6 operations in tier 8s. Let's just say when we were doing Operation Arai, which is a tier 7 operation, but everybody's in tier 8 battleships and cruisers rather than the tier 7s that you used to have to queue up in, and you're waiting for the Missouri to come around the corner of the harbour mouth, and instead it's a Yamato. Yeah, that was fun. And they're hard as well. And I don't just mean the way that they've scaled all of the existing operations to match the tiers of the ships that players are queuing up for in. I mean, things like Operation Hermes, where you have to escort a French battleship out of a combat zone, and you're under constant air and destroyer attack. And Operation Ultimate Frontier, where you're doing other things. And Cherry Blossom, where you're doing other things. I mean, they're just difficult to do with multiple objectives that need to be completed at the same time, and it really does require a coordinated team. So, you know, good luck with that if you're queuing up in randoms. But the thing is, even with a full division going in on voice comms, they're not easy. And I do like that. I like that they're not a pushover, and they are a bit of a challenge. So congratulations to Wargaming for what is, in my opinion at least, a very, very successful return to the Operations game mode. And then there's the other bit of news about World of Warships. Maybe not so good. So, on their latest Waterline video, the developers announced that they were working on cross-realm matchmaking technology, which is a posh way of saying merging servers. Now, call me a wizened old cynic if you must, but I've been having a good think about this, and I cannot remember the last time a game developer announced that they were merging and consolidating their servers because they suddenly had more people playing the game than they were anticipating or could handle. Generally speaking, when servers start getting merged, it's because there are less people playing the game than they'd anticipated. And so the servers get merged to keep the battle queue times down, so people don't have to spend 3 minutes in a queue waiting to get into a random battle because there's nobody on the server. World of Warcraft didn't start shutting servers down and doing cross-realm gaming because they still had 15 million subscribers, you know what I'm saying? Those days were long gone. They were down to 8 million at peak times. That's why they started shutting down servers, doing server mergers, forced server transfers, and so on and so on and so on. Star Wars The Old Republic didn't start shutting down and consolidating servers and going free to play because it had a vibrant and healthy subscriber community. Yeah, this sort of thing is a sign that a game's dying, not that a game's doing well. Well, maybe dying is too strong a term. I know that, you know, there are lots of YouTube videos out there claiming this exact thing. Oh my god, World of Warships is dying. Well, yeah, no it isn't. I know that makes for a good clickbait video title. And hey, you know what? I'm not knocking anybody. Clickbait titles and clickbait thumbnails work. But I think we're probably stretching a bit to say that World of Warships is dying. It's probably not growing anymore. It may even be in decline, but it's a long way from dying. The cynic in me may even suggest that this could be the reason why Wargaming suddenly seemed to be so keen to actually address community demands and do things like bring back reworked operations. Yeah. No, I'm sure they're doing it for the good of the game. Because that's always been Wargaming's primary concern, hasn't it? Ensuring that everybody has a great game experience. No, sorry. I can't say that with a straight face, no matter how hard I try. That's after 4 takes, by the way. I still can't say that without laughing. Anyway, speaking of World of Warcraft, I've really been getting into that again lately. And I'm not talking about the boring ass retail version with the upcoming Dragonflight expansion. World of Warcraft Classic. Because they've just gotten around to doing the Wrath of the Lich King, the second expansion to the game, which goes live, I think, on the 26th of this month. But right now we're in the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch, and that means it's Scourge Invasion time again. Now, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, first of all, and you can blame Mr. Gibbons for this, by the way, the World of Warships streamer, who's been playing Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and got me into it as a break from World of Warships. And I'm currently out-leveling him. Despite the fact that he was level 14 when I started, and right now I'm 4 levels ahead of him. I've reached level 52 on my gnome warlock, Tinky Winkle. Yes, no, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly good gnome name. Anyway, I digress. So, back in the day, right before the Wrath of the Lich King expansion came out, they had this pre-patch event, the Scourge Invasion. And what happened was, in the first phase, people started noticing these crates of grain that were suddenly appearing on street corners around all of the capital cities. These look a bit suspicious. Wonder what happens if I click on them. And if you were to click on the crate of grain, you would get an infection. And if the infection went untreated for, I think, 2 minutes, it would kill you and turn you into a plague zombie. And as a plague zombie, you could then infect other players with the plague. And the same thing would happen to them. However, in the first phase at least, this wasn't that bad. Because players like priests and paladins could cleanse the disease off you, and you'd be fine. So this whole plague thing was really a minor annoyance at best. Life went on. Well, after about a week, the Scourge Invasion went into Phase 2. And people started noticing that they couldn't automatically cleanse this plague. It started resisting attempts to dispel it. And the effects were getting worse. And so people started getting mildly concerned. And of course you would have players who were deliberately trying to get themselves infected so they could go around and spread the plague. And you'd have players who were doing the exact opposite, forming groups of healers and dispellers going around trying to combat the plague and the plague zombies. And then it went into Phase 3, and the plague started getting really, really nasty. The incubation timer went down from 2 minutes to 1 minute, which meant you had 1 minute to try to get the thing cleansed off you. And you also suffered a movement debuff. So trying to get to a healer took longer, and you had less time in which to do it. And slowly the cities started to descend into chaos. And it was amazing. In fact, it was so good, the Centre for Disease Control started monitoring the World of Warcraft servers to see how people reacted to an outbreak of a plague in this kind of way. Eventually, when it got into Phase 4, the cities just became no-go zones. The plague just became so hard to counter, and there were just so many plague zombies, including the players who were deliberately trying to get themselves infected in order to spread chaos, that even organised raid groups of dedicated healers and fighters just couldn't keep things under control. The cities just became mass graveyards, filled with the dead, the dying, and the undead. And it was amazing. Of course, it wouldn't be Blizzard if they didn't manage to find a way to screw it up somehow. Because the city of Shattrath in Outland was a sanctuary where there was no player-on-player combat permitted, and the game forgot to tag newly risen undead ghoul players as not players, so they were free to attack any actual living players, but you weren't allowed to fight back. So cities like Shattrath just became wandering hordes of the undead with actual players on their flying mounts, hovering overhead, looking for a chance to get to the bank without being eaten by a horde of zombies. But hey, whatever. It was still amazing. And that's the current state of World of Warcraft Classic at the moment. And I've been having so much fun, while at the same time taking every opportunity to remind Mr. Gibbons of what a dirty, filthy scrub-a-dub he is, because my gnome warlock is staying 4 levels ahead of him at all times. Hey, if you can't take a joke, he shouldn't be playing World of Warcraft, or he shouldn't have gotten me back into it. So yeah, that's the week that was. Queen Elizabeth II has died. King Charles III is the new monarch. People on Twitter are arseholes. Gonna Heat PC, new tax simulator in early access, which I will definitely have a go of if I can put World of Warcraft Classic down for long enough. Operations are back in World of Warships. World of Warships player numbers are probably on the decline, and World of Warcrack has sunk its teeth into me once again. And on that note, that's it for today. Hope you all had a great weekend, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.